Culture is the basis of every society, but what happens when that culture becomes toxic? Oppression and discrimination are seen throughout the world, involving different marginalized groups, and start when there's a prejudice against a certain group. The prejudice tends to occur when older generations pass down thoughts and opinions to younger generations. While prejudice can simply be a thought, discrimination is the manifestation of these violent and hateful thoughts, which happens when a person is treated differently based on their sex, gender, race, or disability, which are things that person cannot change. Here there will be a focus on sexual oppression within a culture and how the LGBTQ community is marginalized in different parts of the world. Discussing the ins and outs of this issue is difficult to examine in depth effectively. Sexual oppression or homophobia is present in most cultures around the world, but is handled differently. There is a desperate need for this group to be understood and protected. The acronym LGBTQIA+ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer or questioning, intersex, and asexual. Some people also refer to it as LGBTQ. Being a part of the LGBTQ community does not make someone any less of a person or truly any different from someone who's heterosexual. Furthermore, identifying as transgender or gay is not a choice. People within the community are discriminated against because others believe that it is wrong or that it is a choice. It also doesn't mean that someone is incapable of having a family or taking care of children. Richard Johnson, a member of the LGBTQ community, talks about his own experiences as a gay man.
My name is Richard Johnson. I also have raised my family here, which is something that I didn't initially expect to have. When you realize that you're gay and you start thinking, especially what I did, which was in the 80s, about what your life is going to be like, you think, well, that means I'm not going to have kids. And that ended up not being true. I now have 8 kids. And 8 grandchildren, and many just absolutely wonderful daughter-in-laws. And it's a very large and beautiful family. What I didn't realize is that my kids would come to me from other people's families.
The possibility of not having kids hinders the community's ability to be seen as a productive member of society. This is also present when members of the community try and seek religious fulfillment. Many think that being gay is against Christianity and the Christian Bible, when in reality, the original version of the Bible has been mistranslated from Hebrew to German. The Christian Bible was originally written in Hebrew and has since then been translated over 1,000 times. It has been proven multiple times that the original transcript was mistranslated, which has subsequently caused religious homophobia. Other religions such as Islam and Judaism can be more accepting to members of the LGBTQ community, but there is still discrimination within those religions. Sean Connors, a member of the community and employee of PFLAG, shares their experiences as a transgender man.
I am the chapter engagement coordinator for the northern region at PFLAG National. I work as a community organizer of sorts, and my region includes Ohio, which I think is really cool. My job is to provide some guidance and help in helping our chapters figure out how they can best support folks in their communities. I also work on a federal and state level to support advocacy efforts like the Equality Act that's in the Senate right now, and we're looking at an upcoming trans youth sports bill in Ohio, so that's on my plate too. But things like that are what I do.
In Ohio, there's a lack of anti-discrimination and protection laws for LGBTQ. Many people who are considered different from the majority of the population are often protected through federal and state anti-discriminatory laws. This allows marginalized groups to be given the same opportunities and advantages. Compared to the rest of the U.S., Ohio is the worst place for LGBTQ. Though Ohio is a swing state, there tend to be large concentrations of conservative-leaning people who tend to be against LGBTQ for religious purposes. The rest of the country is pretty divided on the issue. Despite having a couple of federal laws that protect LGBTQ, there aren't as many state laws. Only 6 years ago was same-sex marriage decriminalized in the U.S., meaning 7 years ago 2 men could go to jail for getting married. In November 2020, 16.7% of hate crimes were over sexual orientation. This is the third largest group behind race and religion. Especially in 2020, transgender and non-gender conforming Black and brown women face the most violence.
The community is as diverse as the people in it.
Different countries in the world treat this issue differently, though. Canada is known for being one of the best countries for LGBTQ. It was one of the first countries that had protection laws for anyone non-conforming, meaning that anyone who wasn't heterosexual or cisgender was protected federally from discrimination. Canada has laws in place to protect same-sex couples and their rights, including adoption rights. Queer people are allowed to serve in the military openly, and transgender people are allowed to change their name and legal gender. A same-sex couple is treated the same as a traditional heterosexual couple in Canada. Furthermore, an overwhelming majority of Canadian residents are extremely inclusive, considering there have been protection laws in Canada since the 1970s. Despite Canada being one of the most inclusive countries, non-heterosexual people are still the minority. LGBTQ people are roughly 3 times more probable to be assaulted.
The prejudice is a cisgender issue. Most of the prejudice I have faced has not been something that has been overt. It has not been somebody trying to beat me up, somebody trying to overtly hurt me, or all of us shouldn't have to spend that much time making other people comfortable.
Generally, most cultures in Europe and in countries influenced by Christianity tend to be anti-LGBTQ. However, there are a few countries in Europe that are exceptionally safe and inclusive for LGBTQ. Nordic countries are the frontier for LGBTQ rights and laws. Same-sex partnerships have been legal since the 1940s in Sweden, and numerous government protocols and laws have been put in place to protect sexual minorities in Sweden. Pride is celebrated in many parts around the world, but Stockholm, Sweden is one of the biggest pride parades in Europe. The Stockholm Pride Parade includes walks and parties in the streets, debates, films, musical performances, seminars, and concerts. Holding more than 600,000 people, Pride in Sweden is to spread the love of LGBTQ and celebrate everyone's equal worth, bringing happiness to many. Norway is similar to Sweden, with overwhelming positivity from Norway's general population in supporting same-sex marriage. In 2016, the Lutheran Church of Norway approved the celebration of gay marriage, but it wasn't until 2017 the church adopted a special liturgy so that gay members could get married in the church. Similar to the United States, Norway has a separation between church and state, meaning a person has the opportunity to practice their own religion without the interference of anyone else or government officials. Unless a law has been broken, that person can only be punished for the crime they've committed, not their religious beliefs or consensual relationship. While the Nordic region has come a long way with embracing LGBTQ rights, there are other areas of the world that lack this acceptance. The continent of Africa is by far the worst place for anyone in the LGBTQ community. Worldwide, there are 72 countries that still criminalize same-sex relationships, and 32 of them are African countries. In 2014, the president of Nigeria, Goodluck Jonathan, signed a bill prohibiting homosexual relationships in any sense. The bill violated multiple human rights treaties and the Nigerian constitution by allowing torture and violence against any and all members of the LGBTQ community. This allowed for mob violence and lynching against multiple groups of people. In 2014, a group of people were armed with a multitude of weapons, nearly beat to death 14 men who were suspected of being gay. Homosexuality is seen as a Western practice, despite there being evidence of homosexual individuals before colonization. Africa tends to be homophobic due to the strong religious influence on culture from Christianity and Islam. Generally, because of the culture, religion, and imperialism, homosexuality is seen as un-African and is highly criminalized. Africa and Russia both have religious reasons for their homophobic views, but there is more slander and public discrimination in Russia. Russia's government has passed laws to make it illegal to spread homosexual propaganda in order to protect minors in Russia. Homosexuality is often equated to rape and pedophilia, making it easy for leaders to create such laws and allow violence. Because of this misconception about queer people, there is an extreme mistrust and fear from the public that has been increased by government propaganda. In 2013, a 23-year-old man was found dead after being stripped, raped with a beer bottle, and killed from having his skull smashed in. This is not uncommon because nearly 75% of Russians believe homosexuality is morally unacceptable. Persecution of LGBTQ individuals used to include blackmail and possibly mild violence, but currently is extremely violent and used to purify Russia. Families of victims are often invited to the killings to prove their loyalty to Russia and the state. Homophobia is mainly politically rooted and state-sponsored. Queer people are a scapegoat for the government to use for keeping power. Homophobia is never something that occurs naturally in society. It is a product of individuals trying to keep power through scapegoats. In almost all ancient cultures around the world, same-sex relationships were accepted and even common. Through the modernization of the world, there have been a rise of discrimination. In the United States, the government and its works are meant to keep separate from the church and other religions, considering it was founded on the principles of freedom and democracy. Despite not having an official religion, the U.S. bases many of its laws and ideas on traditional and screwed Christian ideas. Christianity is based on loving thy neighbor and accepting those unlike you, yet in most cases it is clear that religion has become an excuse for blatant discrimination. Oftentimes, people pick and choose what is and what is not a sin. When it comes to queer rights, there is no political message. It is simply a message of acceptance and equality.
I think that all people who are LGBTQ should be valued by society and have the space to value themselves. I think that in my work at PFLAG, I really strive to educate people on issues that are important to our communities and advocate for inclusive policies in schools and churches and communities.
Today, the line between what is moral and what is political has become extremely blurred, especially when it comes to the rights and protection of minorities. Cultural oppression is something that is unfair to marginalized groups and creates a giant gap between those affected and unaffected, which overall creates societal turmoil that can rip the fabrics of society. Discrimination, whether racial, sexual, or religious, is everyone's issue, not just the group affected by the oppression. It is easy to fall into line and align yourself with the beliefs and ideas of those around you, even if you know they are wrong. But what happens when those beliefs become violent and dangerous? Someone will unfairly pay the price, oftentimes with their life.
There's the phrase, listen to understand. If we all put a lot more time into just trying to understand more about everything, we would be a lot better off. We don't need to take actions with who people are and what they believe. It helps to understand where people are coming from, but how anybody else lives their life is not something that I have to affect and change. I have grown up in a red state with honestly fairly conservative views myself, and I have had people view with great terror who they thought I was and what they thought the consequences of that was. What they have found out getting to know me and what I have found out getting to know them is that we vastly good people. Given the opportunity not to be scared and reactive, we will do good things for each other, and we should. So every time I start to get scared about how somebody's going to react, I slow myself down and I seek an opportunity to listen.